afternoon. Welcome to Global Report. I'm your host, Lily. We have with us today Mr. Bill Sharp, who was a visiting scholar at the National Taiwan University in 2020, just last year, and the Institute of Taiwan History in 2016, and a Fudan scholar in Shanghai in 2017. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, Bill, I have to pay special homage to you because you were one of our earlier hosts. In fact, you were the one who gave me my first appearance on ThinkTech. So thank you very much.
Well, you're quite welcome.
Now, Bill, I know that you have written plenty of op-eds for major newspapers. You have appeared on national radio and TV stations, and you have been quoted widely in major publications. So this is nothing new to you, right? This is child's play for you, right?
It's always a great opportunity, yeah.
I know that you spend time, as I mentioned, in Taiwan and China, and most of your research centers on Taiwan politics, Taiwan policies, and Taiwan society. So today I'd like to pick your brain on the president of Taiwan, Tsai Ing-Wen. This is a remarkable lady who's the first woman to chair a major political party in Taiwan. She's also the first female presidential candidate and the first female president of Taiwan. But before all her victories, there were her defeats. There was the 2012 loss to Ma Ying-jeou. Could you tell us why she lost that 2012 election to Ma Ying-jeou? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that she lost the 2012 election to Ma Ying-jeou because I don't think the U.S. was quite ready for her. She made a trip to Washington and she did the think tank circuit. And it doesn't seem that she impressed anybody very much. And so they more or less stuck with Ma Ying-jeou.
So 2 years on, in 2014, she actually led the TPP, the Democratic Progressive Party, to a landslide victory in the local elections. I think DPP secured 13 of 22 Taiwan's municipalities and counties. And in 2015, before her 2016 election, she went to United States again. And
right.
She met with McCain, she met with Reid, and she won the 2016 election. How do you think her meeting with the American policymakers this time, how much of that played into her 2016 victory?
Well, I think that by that time, the U.S. became very wary of the KMT, the Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang. And they were sort of thinking, you know, we need to back somebody else, essentially what it amounted to. And she was very impressive this time around. She kind of knew the think tank circuit in Washington, and she played it very, very well.
Now, looking at her first term, I know there were several highlights. There was the passing of the same-sex legislation. There was the formal apology made to the indigenous people of Taiwan on behalf of the Taiwan government. There was the NSP, the new southbound policy designed to engage targeted countries more closely in order to reduce Taiwan's dependence on China. And there was also the rather unpopular pension and labor reforms, right. And there was controversy over the passing of same-sex legislation too. Then there was the utterly disastrous 2018 local elections. Before we go into her second term, Bill, could you give us an assessment on her performance in the first term?
Well, during the first term, I think she had a premier. The premier in Taiwan runs the day-to-day affairs of the government. And I'm not sure that the premier, Lin Chuan was his name, really wanted the job, but he was a very good friend of hers. He was actually not a member of the Democratic Progressive Party, the DPP, her party. But she persuaded him to carry out the role of premier. Now, I've met with him, and he knows everything there is to know about money. He had been Minister of Finance before, and he's quite a good financial mind. But he really lagged on political savvy. He hadn't had much political experience. And actually, Tsai Ing-Wen's political experience and a leadership position was lacking as well. I've interviewed Zhu Lilun, the highly successful former mayor of New Taipei, and I've also interviewed in some detail, in some substance, in some depth, James Song Chui. And regardless of what you might think about those two gentlemen, they know exactly how Taiwan works. They understand what makes Taiwan tick. And I remember talking about Tsai Ing-Wen's kind of bumpy ride with Julie Lun. And he said, well, you know, the problem is she doesn't have much political experience. Well, I said, you know, she was head of the Mainland Affairs Council. He said, that doesn't really count. She was a deputy vice premier. And he said, I remember what he said. He said, well, you know, I'll tell you, I was vice premier too. And I can tell you this, you really don't learn much. You learn something about foreign policy, you learn something about defense, but that's about it. If you want to be president of Taiwan, you have to be the mayor of a major city or a xianzhang, a county magistrate. That's how you really learn how things work. And she didn't have that experience. She had run for the mayor's office of Xinbei, New Taipei at one time, but she didn't do very well. James Song was a little bit more direct. He said, we're talking about Tsai Ing-Wen's qualification. And he said, and I said, well, she was, you know, premier, vice premier. And he goes, well, that's a flower-based position. Like, it doesn't really count. So there was some lack of political knowledge and political experience that I think hurt her. I think also, some people say her communication skills are not that great, that she's very comfortable talking to a certain number of people close to her, but in public, her communication skills are not all that great. And I think there's a problem that plagued her during the 2018 local elections. She really didn't get the message out. And some people have said she's a little too bureaucratic as well. Yeah.
So did it come as a major surprise to you? The 2018 local elections, did they come as a major surprise to you? Or was that kind of expected, given that she was going downwards, she was at a low point of her presidential office?
I think I was somewhat surprised by that because, you know,
especially Kaohsiung, right? Especially Kaohsiung. I mean, Kaohsiung went to Kuomintang.
Right, exactly. And I don't quite understand why the Kaohsiung went to the Kuomintang, but well, I mean, I think in a way I do, but I mean, it was really quite a shock. And Kaohsiung ended up paying the price for that because they got a lousy mayor. Highly incompetent. He really didn't achieve anything. He had no really substantive administrative experience. He was very good campaigner. There's no doubt about that. Very good at retail politics, very good at talking to people. And he could connect with people that were not so well educated and people who lived in the countryside, because he did have a reasonable amount of experience dealing with agricultural issues. So he really connected with farmers. And he often said, hey, well, look, previous presidents have all been legal graduates, law graduates of National Taiwan University and studied in America. They're the elite. I'm the Shui-bian, the citizen's president. Well, I'm not so sure how much of a Shui-bian president he was, since later it was alleged that he and his wife really pretty actively were flipping real estate properties back and forth. And I don't know, somehow I just don't think that's what a Shui-bian does. And there was a lot of other allegations faced against him, but he's not going away. He's still there. Yeah.
Well, he certainly ran on a populist platform, and now he's remembered as the man who lost to Tsai Ing-Wen by a whopping 25%. Now, going from her first term into the 2020 election, I know in early 2019, President of China, Xi Jinping, openly proposed a one country, two systems formula for eventual reunification. And Tsai Ing-Wen essentially said, you know, go fish. I reject the one country, two systems, and I reject the 1992 consensus, right?
Right.
But the following month, I recall she announced her run for re-election on American network, the CNN. So here we are in the second term. Tell us, what are the challenges facing this lady? Maybe we can start with the domestic issues. What can we expect from her in terms of economic, legislative, judicial, and political reforms?
Well, she no sooner got reelected than she launched into a number of reforms, and I'll mention just a couple here. Okay, one was she set up a committee for constitutional review in the Lie-Fa-Yuan, the LY, the legislature. Okay, and that has been proposed several times before, but she went ahead and did it this time. Okay, and then she sought to abolish the control yuan, the Jinsha yuan, and replace it with a human rights commission headed up by one of her close allies, Ying-jeou, the former mayor of Kaohsiung, the former assistant in the president's office of Tsai Ing-Wen, someone whose advice she depends on quite a bit. Okay, and the third thing was, and this is really unique, there's a feeling, a long-term feeling in Taiwan that the legal system really doesn't represent the interests of the people, that the legal system exists here and the people exist here, and there's not much of a connection. So Tsai Ing-wen, being a lawyer, really pushed to have created a jury system. And there was a dispute then, well, should this jury system be like an American or a British or Canadian, Australian jury system, or should it follow the Japanese model? Well, ultimately, after going back and forth, they decided to pursue a Japanese model of jury system, sometimes called the citizen judge system. And what this would do, this would only be used in cases where the defendant would possibly be facing a prison sentence of 10 or more years. So it's said that this system, once it goes into play, which is 2023, I believe, if I remember right, would only be used in situations where the defendant was facing a sentence of 10 years. And probably the estimates vary a bit, 800 to 1,000 cases per year. Now, there are 9 judges altogether, 3 professional judges and 6 citizen judges drawn from the public at large. And they together listen to the case and then determine a verdict and then vote. So there's, to me, there seems to be some question about the voting system that needs to be ironed out a bit. But I don't know, I think it's a right step forward. And I've talked to several judges about this. And I've been able to make some connections with some really well-placed judges. And in fact, one is a former constitutional court justice who's somewhat similar to a Supreme Court justice in the United States. They said, well, we're going to try this system and see how it works. You know, it might need to be modified. And I really give them credit for pushing through with this. Now, the people who are really the staunchest advocates of an American-style jury system were those that were very much in support of Shui-bian. And they felt that if Taiwan had had an American-style jury system, Shui-bian would have been acquitted and wouldn't have had to go to jail. So they're really big on that. On the other hand, it's interesting to remember, I mean, there's a lot of American political thought in Taiwan, there's no doubt about it, but there's also a lot of Japanese political thought. And I think lots of times people overlook that. The voting system used for selecting people, representatives leeway and the Lie-Fa-Yuan comes out from Japan. And so sometimes they're more comfortable with Japanese conventions than they are with American conventions. So it's very interesting what she's going to do. Now, I want to back up here.
Sorry to interrupt there. You also mentioned the Constitutional Amendment Committee. I'm interested in that because I heard that she's looking to lower the voting age from 20 to 18
Yeah, that's
and
true.
to update this very outdated governmental system. She's looking to streamline it because we know that this is a system that was inherited from the Chinese nationalists back in 1949. So is she going far and fast enough with this reform? Or is she taking a one step forward, two step backwards, staccato?
On the voting age, her political base is young people, okay? In fact, she was very supportive of same-sex marriage because that was a huge issue with the young population. Young means those under 39 years of age, okay? And so the way the law is in Taiwan right now is you have to be 20 years of age to vote in a presidential election. You only need to be 18 to vote in an election focused on referendum issues. She wants to make it 18 and 18. In other words, presidential candidates in presidential elections, those at 18 years of age and above should be able to vote. Of course, the Kuomintang doesn't like that because their political base tends to be older people, and they don't want to be snuffed out by younger people. In fact, I would suggest that that's one of the big problems. Well, I'm jumping ahead of myself here, but I think that's one of the big problems of the Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang, is that they really have very little connection with young people. And then jumping back a bit, I'm sort of scrambling all over the place, but
it's okay.
You mentioned streamlining the government. Yes, I think that is a concern because not only does she want to get rid of the control yuan, but she wants to also get rid of the examination yuan. And the argument is that those functions carried out by those two components of the government are actually repeated in other ministries of the government. So if you cut out the control yuan, you cut out the examination yuan, the government will be streamlined. And also people say that, well, those two yuan, they just exist as kind of sinecures for political allies. And and maybe there's a bit of a contradiction here because the control yuan is being replaced by the Human Rights Commission, which is going to be headed up by someone who's very close to Tsai Ing-Wen. So call it whatever you will.
Okay. All right. Moving from the social issues into the economic industrial development, how did she do in those areas? I know she finished her first term with the highest GDP growth rate among the 4 Asian tigers, namely South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Yeah. And there was the jobless rate was kept low because she did such a remarkable job with the pandemic. I mean, the industrial production kept humming along, domestic consumption kept humming along, and they were the one that increased their production of PPE, the personal protection equipment, and was able to engage in face mask diplomacy. So did she do well? Could we say she do well in those areas?
Well, I think that she does well in foreign policy if you exclude cross-strait relations. Very high approval rate with her diplomatic pursuits. She's had a lot of big foreign policy successes during her second term. Two high-level visits from high-level American officials, a visit by the admiral in charge of intelligence at Indo-PACOM, the delegation from the Czech Republic led by the Czech Senate president, and she had a virtual meeting with the U.S. ambassador to the UN. So she's done very well in that sense. But I do think that she's got two big basic economic development programs. And one is called the 6 Core Industries. And this highly focuses on the development of high-tech energy, green energy, clean energy, and that kind of thing.
Strategic and defense and strategic stockpile. Yes, all of those.
And Asian Silicon Valley, I would say in some of these she's doing very well. Asian Silicon Valley seems to be progressing well. Energy, clean energy is really a highly supported plank of her platform within the DPP. And the national defense industry, it seems to me, is going along pretty well. She's developed a prototype, a trainer, that will replace the ancient trainers used by the Taiwan Air Force. And I think those are supposed to come online in 2024, I think.
Now, I understand that military spending has gone up under her watch too. Is that correct?
Yeah, and that's true. That's actually, we're kind of skipping all around here. Can we talk about her economic plans and then get to your question about the defense budget?
Yes, actually, I do want to save some time to talk about, Taiwan, China, Taiwan, US.
Sure.
Because you mentioned that she was inching closer to United States. My questions to you would be, do you think that the US is somewhat limited in their tools to help Taiwan? Because after all, Taiwan is only recognized by 14 to 15 former countries.
Well, I think the US support for Taiwan is increasing as we talk. And I think the US has a far greater appreciation for the geostrategic significance and importance of Taiwan than it did in the past. I heard one time I attended a conference in Taiwan, and there was a high-level American official, whose name I will not say, and who kind of debunked the utility of Taiwan's geostrategic location due to the modern high precision weapons. Well, that way of thinking is passé now. And when you think about it, and I'll give you this example. Okay, you lived in Hawaii. I live in Hawaii. Okay, if Taiwan were to become part of the PRC would change it into a huge naval base, from which they would dispatch their naval vessels into the Western Pacific to challenge American influence, just like the Imperial Japanese Navy did during World War II. And, they've already flipped a couple of key South Pacific nations, the Solomon Islands, Kiribati, for example. Kiribati is only 1,850 miles from Hawaii. And there, I'm sure they're going to set up a listening post to eavesdrop on Indo-PACOM communications. And Kiribati had relations with China before, and China left behind a space satellite tracking station, which I'm sure is just a matter of time before they renovate and reoperate. So, in a sense, Taiwan shields Hawaii. Because, I'm certain that China would threaten Hawaii if there weren't such a, if the US let all its defenses down. And the other thing, there's some other aspects to Taiwan's geostrategic location that are worth talking about. If China were to take over Taiwan, Taiwan would then be used to cut off Northeast Asia from Southeast Asia, and which would mean that those tankers supplying oil to Japan and South Korea and other places would have to swing to the right or swing to the east and to deliver the oil, which would increase the time necessary for delivery. So there's all kinds of reasons that the U.S. is interested in a closer relationship with Taiwan, and perhaps the biggest reason is, frankly speaking, is that the security of Taiwan is the security of Japan, and the Japanese, although they prefer to keep a very low profile, they're very concerned about the future of Taiwan. They really don't want to see it become part of China. So nowadays we hear a lot of discussion about the importance of Taiwan to Japan. In fact, the Japanese Prime Minister is visiting Washington this week, or maybe he's already there. And it seems that his emphasis is going to be to push cooperative efforts to protect Taiwan.
You know, Bill, that was such an excellent piece of golden analysis. I think I can play that and listen to that over and over again. That was an excellent piece of analysis. Thank you so very much. Now, when it comes to Xi Jinping, do you think he views this whole reunification as as an issue of legacy? An issue of legacy to cement his place in history, because he told Taiwan in no uncertain terms that if you were to make any effort at all to exert full independence, I'm sending the military force in.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I know what he says. I really have some doubts whether, well, let me back up a little bit here. You mentioned January, when was that? January 2nd, 2019 speech.
Yes.
On the 40th anniversary of Deng Xiaoping's message to Taiwan compatriots. And there he connected, he demanded that Taiwan accept the 92 consensus, which is very controversial in Taiwan. And he also connected that to acceptance of the one country, two systems method of government. And that has no followers of any kind, regardless of where their position is on the political spectrum in Taiwan. So he gave Tsai Ing-Wen a great boost in her re-election campaign, because after that, her approval rating went up 10 plus points. And she really benefited from that.
Yes, I would just add to that, Bill, sorry to interrupt. I'll just add to that. Not only did that strengthen the support for Tsai in her domestic constituency, it also garnered her largest support in the international community, especially from the democratic governments, because they too have tasted what they felt was Beijing overbearing influence on their countries.
Right. I agree with that. Often the question comes out, will China attack Taiwan or will it not attack Taiwan?
Before you answer that, Bill, can I just tie it into my $1 million question to you? Do you think that United States would go to war with China, or would China go to war with United States, risk military confrontation with United States over Taiwan? So can you tie that all in as your last response? Because we have 1 minute to close.
Okay, 1 minute to close. And I want to say a word about this book. Just written off just fresh off the press by a friend of mine. I think that Melissa's going to show the link. It's free of charge. That's always a question. It does seem that a few years ago, the Chicago Institute of World Affairs ran a poll that said that the U.S. support for a war with Taiwan, with China over Taiwan, was about 30%. I understand that that number has increased. The fact of the matter is, if the U.S. wants a position in Asia, it just might have to go to war with China over Taiwan. But on the other hand, I don't think that China will attack Taiwan unless there's a very unusual circumstance. They much prefer to psychologically, emotionally wear Taiwan down and have Taiwan, as the Marxists say, fall like a rotten lemon from the tree. And at that time, according to the Marxist dream, everybody will rise up and welcome us with open arms. I think that's their philosophy. They don't want to attack Taiwan because there would be too many people would get killed. Their infrastructure, like the semiconductor industry, which is another key reason the U.S. wants to have a good relationship with Taiwan, because Taiwan makes the best semiconductors in the world, and they're crucial for any economic development. They want all that stuff to be intact. They don't want to create a huge mess that might turn into another 228 incident.
Yeah, I think you're right, Bill. I think they may not go to war, but they're going to continue to apply pressure on Taiwan. I mean, they have their planes flying into the Taiwan Strait. They have their ships sailing right through the Miyako Straits, very close to Taiwan.
Right.
Well, Bill, our time is up. Thank you so much for the generosity of your time. Before we go, I do want to let our audience know that ThinkTech is doing our Spring 2021 Fund Drive. We're looking to raise $20,000 to help with our operating expenses. So please do join me and Bill in giving what you can. You can donate on the website, thinktechhawaii.com. There's a blue please donate button. or you can send in your check to the ThinkTech Hawaii. The address is on the website too. So thank you so much. And thank you so much, Bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.